I want to talk about courage and the wisdom of courage and how we actually use that in our lives, that true courage is not the absence of fear, it is the ability to face it. What I'm interested in life is our ability to face things, learning an ability to deal with the fears that we have and learning what courage means. That I grew up in the world of faith. Actually, I'm already way too ahead of my sermon. I forgot a story, so I got to backtrack a little bit here. Where was I at there? Oh, I know what I was going to tell you. Knott's Berry Farm, my friends. Okay, so I'm a dad, and my son turned 10 years old a couple weeks ago, and so he was taking, hey, there we go. So we're taking all of his buddies to Knott's Berry Farm this week, and of course they want to go because they get out of school, and it's like standardized state testing. Boring, so let's take them out of that. And we went to Knott's Berry Farm together. And when I find out when I'm there that one of the kids is scared of roller coasters, that dad should have definitely told me that ahead of time. And so, like a good Enneagram 3 father that I am, I told the kid, like, you don't have to go on the roller coaster, but I was doing everything I could to encourage it, right? So I said, I'm not going to force you to do it, but what I am going to do is I'm going to make you go in every single line with us all the way up to getting on the roller coaster, and then I'm going to trust in this great spiritual gift called peer pressure to get you on that roller coaster, so that you will face your fears, right, and find some courage in this journey. This kid was able to get on the first roller coaster, Ghost Rider. If you've been to Knott's Berry Farm, I haven't been. Oh, okay, some Ghost Rider fans love that. Haven't been in 12 years, so I forgot all these things. And he had a great time. Of course he did, because he's on a roller coaster. Who doesn't love the feeling of a roller coaster? I'm one of those people on a roller coaster, like, I'm just like, ah! Like, I love laughing. I love being loud. I want hands in there. I want to, like, fully experience this thing. Like, I want my face to hurt because I'm smiling so much, right? That's what I want out of a roller coaster. Now, finally, we get to Quicksilver, like where your feet are dangling around, and you're like, whoa, all that kind of stuff. And we get to the top, and when we get to the top, this other kid starts immediately crying. And I'm like, you don't have to get on it. It's totally okay. Like, this is a little bit too far. This one's scary for you. So him and another buddy, they go to the side. We go on it. We have a great time. The other boys are telling him, like, how amazing it was. And he's like, okay, maybe later I'm going to do it. So we go to lunch, and we eat some, like, giant burritos, right? And we're eating lunch. And yeah, you are already connecting some dots in Jesus' name. And so we have a little bit of lunch, and we're like, okay, let's go on some let's go like Camp Snoopy, like lighten this thing up a little bit, like prepare ourselves. But in my mind, because I'm a good Enneagram 3, I'm here to just push these kids to the next level, face your fears, right? Courage, it's just how I want everybody to live their life, because that's just the right thing to do. So we go right by Quicksilver again. I'm like, now's the moment. There's only a 5-minute ride. I believe that we can do this thing. And so he's like, okay, I'm brave enough to do it. We go up there, and this kid gets on it, and we're going through it, and there's 4 of them behind me, and I'm in front, so I'm just hearing their screams, and they're having a good time. And then all of a sudden, as the ride's coming to a slowdown, all I hear is a, yes. And I can't see it, but you can like, it's wafting in the air just a little bit, and you just hear it, and you're just like, oh God. And it wasn't the kid who was scared, it was another kid. And I was like, all right, I'm going to explain this one. I'm going to buy a new wardrobe here and deal with this whole thing. And so the ride stops, and the workers have to like clean. It looks like a bowl of chili was poured on a human being here. And then we're walking around, and you just hear people talking about, like, some kid puked all over Quicksilver, right? And the ride's closed down. And here's the thing about courage. Sometimes in life, we just react to courage. We're just forced into it, and as human beings, we're built for it. There's not a parent in this room who wouldn't run into a burning home to save your child. There's not a person in this room that you saw someone in a car accident, you want to go make your way and go care for them. That's just how we're wired as human beings. But there's a big difference between reacting with courage and learning the wisdom of being courageous in your life the rest of the time. Because what I find in life a lot of times is that people will become, we become these amazing, incredible human beings, but we don't always practice the wisdom of finding courage. And so to talk about courage, we're going to talk about some things. We're going to talk about developing some superpowers. And if we can talk about developing some superpowers, then we're going to talk about the 5 C's. If we can talk about the 5 C's, then Batman, my friends. And if we can talk about Batman, then, thank you, Mariah, for the little giggle there. I appreciate that. And if we can talk about Batman, then we'll talk about putting on our oxygen masks. And if we can do that, then we'll talk about some breathing patterns. And if we can understand some breathing patterns, then we can talk about some new abilities. Sound good on a Sunday morning? Yeah. What I love about superheroes and what I love about Jesus are the same thing, is that what I love about superheroes is that a lot of times what I was taught about superheroes is that they got some superpower or ability, and then they just had that ability, and then they did all the cool stuff, right? It just kind of happened for them, and it worked out, and we looked to them to save the world. And when you're a kid, that's what you think a superhero does. That was the same story of faith that I had. That's what I was told about God and Jesus, is that God's just going to show up with superpowers, take care of things, that I'm going to be okay, and I'm not going to have any troubles. That faith and superhero abilities work that way. But that's not even true. We were given the wrong story. The most interesting thing about superheroes and the most interesting things about Jesus is it's learning the process of learning the powers that you have. That's what's so fascinating about the story. That every single superhero that you pick, they go through something. Of course they have powers, but it's not about the power. It's not about the courage that they already possess. It's all about the fears that they have and how they learn to harness their powers based on those fears. That's what makes them interesting. That's what makes them great. What happens is that they eventually learn to love something else so much that even with all of their powers, they still have fear. Because it's not the absence of power that creates courage. It's our ability to face it. It's learning our abilities is the way of Jesus. That what Jesus shows us is a process of growing up, a process of showing up, a process of changing and evolving and transforming and healing and maturing. That's what's interesting. It's about knowing the powers that you have and realizing the appropriate times to use that courage and the appropriate times not to. Those are the things that we want. I love Batman. He's probably my favorite superhero, probably because he doesn't have like a real like superpowers, right? He's just like kind of a rich dude who like does some cool stuff. And one of the things that shapes the Batman story is, if you remember this from like Batman Begins, right? When Bruce Wayne falls in this like cave or this well, and his dad comes down and he says, "Bruce, why do we fall?" And the answer is so that we can learn to pick ourselves back up. And I love that, to learn, so that we can learn to pick ourselves back up. It's not that we just pick ourselves back up. Sometimes we've been taught that in the world of faith. If you just say it enough times and believe it, it's just going to work out for you. No, you have to learn to do these things. You have to learn an ability to face your fears. It takes time. It's a process to learn courage. And what we want to do in this place is be honest about the things that we're learning, and we want to grow in those things. That sometimes I find it fascinating in life that we have just been given a narrative where God's just going to take care of everything for us. But then what we haven't learned is the ability to participate, to grow, to engage, to be students of this way of Jesus in a way that we can eventually just take care of ourselves. And then when we learn to take care of ourselves, then we also have the ability to learn to also take care of others as well. That courage is something that we all want, and courage is something that we all desire. And there's the story of courage in the book of Exodus that I want to share with you. Follow along with me. I'm choking on my own gum. In Exodus chapter 15. What's going on before the story of this king of Egypt is the story of Genesis. And in the story of Genesis, how it ends is there's a guy named Joseph, and Joseph eventually goes to the land of Egypt because his brothers have kind of sabotaged his life and they tried killing him. But eventually, Joseph gets through all of those things. If you remember this, or if you've seen the Prince of Egypt. No, wrong movie. Joseph in the Colored Coat. That's the movie over there. Yeah, that's the one. What's it called? Yeah, that's the one. That's the story that, we're not to the Prince of Egypt yet. I'm trying to give you some reference points here. And Joseph becomes the number 2 in Egypt, and he rescues his family, and his family eventually leaves Israel, and they escape a famine because of it. But then all of that is over with, and now there's a bunch of Hebrews, and they're in Egypt, and now they become slaves. They go from the top into the bottom. And then we're in a story of how did we even get here? And one of the most interesting things is the book of Exodus is the liberation story of the Hebrew Bible. It's the liberation story and salvation story of the Old Testament. It's about God showing up. And we all have these versions of the story, right? We know about Moses, and we know about splitting the Red Sea and the pyrotechnics of what Yahweh does against the Egyptians. But what's really interesting about that story is not just that God liberates and saves, but in all of the salvation stories, it's also about now that you have been liberated from your Pharaoh or your Egypt, whatever that thing may be, now how do you live? Many of us are given stories where we want to be liberated, but we're not asking ourselves now the questions, how might we live now that we have been saved? How might I live now that I see the world in a different way? How might I live now that I feel and find freedom? And what the Exodus story reminds the people of God is that you can be liberated from Egypt and you can go to a promised land, but then you can find yourself enslaved there in the exact same ways. It's inviting us to grow up, to learn not just about courage, but how to practice courage in our lives. And then it's fascinating at the beginning of this Exodus story, it's not about Moses. It's not about any of the big pyrotechnics. There's like this deep, subtle, revolutionary story that 3,500 years ago, there are these midwives. They're the ones who are going to introduce the Exodus story. These midwives who practice on a daily basis bringing life into the world. Where 3,500 years ago, where having a baby, less than 10% of the population actually lived. It's these women that have courage in a deep way, that it's in their bones at a cellular level. These are the ones that set up a story of liberation and courage for us. And the story goes like this, that the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives whose names were Shiphrah and Puah, when you are helping the Hebrew women during childbirth on the delivery stool, if you see that the baby is a boy, kill him. But if it's a girl, let her live. The midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them to do, and they let the boys live. Let me just pause there real quick. The word fear there is not the word fear that we're talking about. The word fear that we're talking about before is like when you're scared of something, when something's not working out for you. The word fear here is a word for like awe, right? And wonder that something is bigger than you. And I just pause and say that real quick because so many of us, our relationship to God is the first fear. You've been scared of God your entire life. You think that God is some type of lifeguard on the beach who's blowing a whistle at you for everything that you do wrong, right? And I heard this from a comedian the other day. Your God has to be bigger and better than the manager at a cheesecake factory, right? But some of you have that view of a God, right? Who's just constantly on your butt about everything that you're not doing. But the fear that these midwives have, the maturity and wisdom that they have in their bones, is know there's some awe and wonder here. Because of the awe, because I experienced that moment where I saw the world fresh for a new way, I am willing to have a different kind of courage in this world. Maybe the first fear that many of us need to let go of is that old version of fear where you're scared of this God. And so much of the work of New Abbey is that you come to a place of having awe again, where you're free to live in wonder in fresh ways. I'm not even going to get through this passage. I'm just preaching on things. Here we go. Then the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and asked them, why have you done this? Why have you let the boys live? And then they gave him some sass, and the midwives answered Pharaoh, Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They are vigorous and give birth before the midwives arrive. So God was kind to the midwives, and the people increased and became even more numerous. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own. Then Pharaoh gave this order to all his people, every Hebrew boy that is born you must throw into the Nile, but let every girl live. If we're going to be courageous, it's not the absence of fear, right? But it's our ability to face it. And so we need to name what our actual fears are. And this is fear in the scared sort of way. Most of our fears revolve around three things. It's fear of ourselves, it's fear of others, or it's fear of systems, or just things that feel like catastrophic, bigger than us. The fear of yourself is this: you don't know if you can trust yourself. You don't know if you can get through that addiction. You don't know if you can handle that pain. You don't know if this is going to be one more moment where you're going to sabotage yourself again, because you seem to sabotage yourself every single step of the way. There's a fear here that I know what's really going on, and maybe the thing that's really going on is me. And you want courage to look at self. Sometimes your fear is around others, that if you even mention their name, your stomach curdles, and you know who they are. It's that family member, it's that employer, it's that person who broke up with you, who hurt you, who betrayed you. You name the thing. It's the pain of life, of just doing relationships, that person, that you live in fear of them. They've hurt you, they've abused you, they've scared you, they've threatened you. There's fear there. Sometimes we have fear of systems. Maybe it's a giant system like a pharaoh or a king or a government, and there's many who maybe feel relevant to that reality and story right now. Maybe it's just something that feels catastrophic. Maybe it's cancer or things that feel out of your control. They're beyond you, that it's not a person, right? It's something else. But we address each of those fears. In the story, what we see here is we see that the story that there's some courageous women. Now, to have courage, you need to practice it. I don't believe that the midwives just went into this story that they were reacting to it. I believe that they live a life. There's a reason that they're midwives and that they've practiced courage for a long time. If you're going to deliver a baby, you have courage, right? You already have a way of being around you, that you are helping these women give birth into the world, that you are producing something that's incredible, and you have a deep courage and understanding and experience behind you. So if we're going to move from courage, if we're going to have courage, and we're going to have some abilities to create courage in our life, then what we need to do is we need to care for ourselves. Caring for ourselves is crucial. That if you cannot care for yourself, it is very difficult to care for other people. As you all have heard on every single airplane, you put your oxygen mask on first before you put the oxygen mask on of somebody around you. You've heard that said a million times, but it's true. And here's the thing about care. We live in 2025. We have more ways to care for ourselves now than we've ever had in human history. You can listen to 10,000 podcasts. You can go read, let them, turn on Super Bowl Sunday. There's plenty of good pastors out there. Just like read 2 pages of Brene Brown, go to a therapist, do some yoga. If you want care, it's not that it's absent in your life. But care is not about knowing how to care for yourself. Care is having the wisdom to practicing caring for yourself. And those are 2 very different things. That so many of us have the knowledge of a million ways that we can care for ourselves, but we don't practice the wisdom of caring for ourselves on a daily basis. I've said this a couple times this week. Knowledge is knowing that tomatoes are a fruit, but wisdom is knowing to never put tomatoes in a fruit salad. Some of you have the knowledge out there, but you're not participating in the wisdom of it, and you're saying to yourselves, why is my life not continuing to work out for me? How do we take that knowledge, and how do we put it into wisdom? And how do we care for ourselves? That when we go to that therapist, how do we find ways to practice what they're saying? When we listen to that Super Bowl Sunday, how do we find ways to practice what is going on there? If we go to yoga, whatever the thing may be, it is about practicing it. That if you want courage, the first ability that you need to learn is to care for yourself. If you can learn to care for yourself, then I think the next thing that you'll be able to do is you'll learn the ability to deal with conflict. I'm a Little League baseball coach, and let me tell you something. Kids are incredible. Parents are dumb, all right? Dumb. Because it's one of those environments where I'm always just so blown away how people have the inability to deal with conflict. And that so many of us in our lives, you will become a great CEO, a creator of this thing, top-notch, whatever. Like, it's insane what people become, and yet when it comes to conflict, you're still a 6-year-old kid there somewhere. Because when conflict arises, what happens is it triggers our trauma responses. And we all have a trauma response system built inside of us. Your fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And when conflict arises, there's a part of your brain and your amygdala that is literally triggered and it is inflamed now and it's very deal with you to deal with life on life's terms. What got you probably to that point in life is your ability to deal with things in normal times. But when conflict arises, you revert. And so we learn, how do we care for ourselves in conflict? Initially, we go care for ourselves and we find other people around us, again, like a therapist or good friends in our life, or we find a good podcast, whatever it may be, that teaches us. Maybe it's through the Enneagram. There's all kinds of different wisdom avenues that show us what our healthy self looks like, what our regular self looks like, and what do we look like when we are in pain or when we're going through it. What does our shadow self look like? And we have to find, when those things come up, not how do I be angry at myself, but I realize I am an Enneagram 3 that knows how to fight. When conflict comes up, I am ready for war. I grew up in a traumatized family, and if somebody wants to battle, I am SEAL Team 6 in a tenth of a second. Let's go. Some of you, when conflict comes up, you are immediately paralyzed, and you do not know what to do, and you are frozen in that moment. Some of you, conflict comes up, and you run like crazy from all of your problems. Some of you, conflict comes up and you go to fawn. You are just incredibly codependent. I mean, in a bad way, that's just who you are. And it's about naming that for ourselves. When we learn to care for ourselves, then we can honestly name the conflict and our trauma responses in our life. Not out of shame, but out of a realization and self-awareness of this is how I respond and react in the world. And I wanted to learn and develop the ability to face my fears. If I'm going to have the ability to face my fears, then I need to proactively understand what I do when I'm in conflict so that when these responses come, I can eventually deal and cope with them. Because when we don't cope with them, we will take the trauma and the conflict we've experienced and we will inevitably share it with other people. And sometimes it happens in simple ways. You are on the freeway and that mother-friendly person cuts you off. My children are here, I realize that, right? But you've practiced in some way dealing with that. And you don't have to go lose your mind and then take that with you the rest of the day. Maybe you got that text message from that person who's created so much fear in your life and it will just paralyze you for the rest of the week. What matters here is that you know your trauma response. You know how you respond when conflict happens. And it's about caring for yourself enough to eventually go address the conflict in your life. If you're going to find courage and the ability to face it, then we need to care for ourselves. We need to understand how we deal with conflict. And then eventually we need to find calm. What I find so fascinating in the world is that I don't care the spiritual teacher that you talk to. Calm they always come back to this breath work. I think it's insane, and I love it. I love that whether you go find indigenous wisdom, if you go to like somebody on Super Bowl Sunday, or even if you look at the first story in Scripture, that God breathed life into humanity. It's a way of saying that every time that you breathe oxygen, that word there in the Hebrew Bible is ruach, which is the Spirit of God. That every time you breathe in, you are breathing the divine. That everything that you need to deal with conflict, that everything that you need to care for yourself is already within you. And I find that fascinating, that all of those wisdom traditions lead to the same place. It's why I go to Hot 8 Yoga, right? You didn't see that coming. I go to Hot 8 Yoga not because I need to learn like the tree pose there and how I'm going to hold it. I learn Hot 8 Yoga for that moment, that when the person cuts me off in traffic, I don't lose my mind, but I can calmly take a deep breath, hold it at the top, and let it go and say, maybe there was a snake in their lap. I had enough time not to go lose it, but to reset myself and say, they have their own conflict that they're going through right now. And I don't know what all of those things are, but I don't need to know. I can learn that because eventually where this really comes in is our most intimate relationships. One of the challenges of our most intimate relationships is sometimes we feel so safe there, it's where we have the most bad behavior. Anyone been there? And part of that is you think, I can get away with it here. You did that shit in Target, someone would say something to you, right? I'm like, that's not how we do life. But you do it with that intimate relationship and you think it's okay. And so what we learn is how do we care for ourselves and how do we deal with conflict, right? And how do I find calm? Because I want to appropriately, right, show up in the most important relationships in my life in a different way. And I've done marriage counseling a long time. And there's a couple ways you can go about it. That toothbrush was left out again and that towel was on the floor and we are getting divorced, right? I'm serious because it represents a lot of other deeper things here of conflict. Someone not listening to you, trusting you, caring for you, intimacy, safety. It's all there in that silly little toothbrush. Or conflict arises in a marriage and you've cared for yourself for so long and you understand your trauma responses and you've practiced calm and you've got an incredible spouse of 19 years and he or she can look at you and can say, maybe you just need a nap. Maybe when that's coming up, it's not a moment for me to argue with you. It's just a moment to realize, oh, you're incredibly stressed right now. This isn't about me. This is an opportunity for me to maybe care for you. That we need these skills when it comes to parenting, need these skills when it comes to our most intimate friendship relationships, that we learn these things, we find calm, so that it's not just for ourselves, but it's eventually for the people around us. The ability to face our fears starts with courage, and then it moves for caring for ourselves. And then we find ability to deal with conflict. Eventually, you will practice calm. And after you've practiced calm, the real final step of maturity is that you have the ability to practice compassion. Compassion is when you bring all of these things together, and then when conflict or fear or whatever inevitably comes up in life, whether it's about yourself, which, by the way, none of those things go away. I had a great conversation with somebody this week, and in the conversation, it was really about this idea of, like, have I gotten over something? It's like, no, I haven't gotten over it. I'm always still in it. We're always evolving. We're always developing. We're always growing. There are so many responses that are still inside of me, but instead of me allowing myself at this point in my life, right, and this is not perfection by any means. It's progress, not perfection. But you're hoping for, oh, I feel really triggered right now. How do I need to go check in with myself? Instead of, how do I ruin everybody else's life around me? Because I've participated in that before. And many of us have in this room as well. And so we learn compassion. And here's the big one. When somebody else, because this kills me as like an Enneagram 3. When somebody else like ruins my day, I'm like, why are your problems not my problems? And then I turn it into compassion. Man, what must they be going through right now? Who cut them off in traffic today? I'm so sorry that their spouse left that toothbrush up again. I bet you they don't feel heard or seen or acknowledged. I'm so sorry that you got that text from that family member and they said that again and it's been like 15 years and you've told them they can't say that anymore, whatever the thing may be. Have you ever just been so angry at someone you've had narratives about who they are and then you sat down for the coffee and you're like, oh, they're just a human being too. Man, they're going through it too. Man, that must have been so painful. And who would become in places of maturity is that we're people who practice compassion. We practice compassion because we've gone through all of these other steps in our life. And we can remind people of having compassion with their self. I surround myself with people who remind me to have compassion for myself. Find people in your life who will teach you compassion for others. I stay away from social media so much because social media does not teach me to have compassion for others. It teaches me that if you're red or blue, we should hate each other. If you're this or that, you should hate each other. And it's not about dealing with justice. I want to deal with justice. This is the story of people dealing with justice. This is an incredible story of civil disobedience. This is the story of who do I want to be and how do I want to navigate the world, right? I want to be somebody who has calm. I want to be somebody who's reminded of compassion because I just feel like I deal with the world in a different way. And the real heroes of this world are always the people who have compassion. The people we make holidays about, the people who read the books about, they're the people who inevitably have gone through all of the conflict that you can ever imagine. They've cared for themselves well. They understand how to keep calm, and they teach us all how to show compassion. It's why we keep coming back into this room to follow the way of Jesus. The way of Jesus is inevitably about not transmitting our pain, but learning to transform it. I think we all want to participate in courage in the world. And if we're going to participate in courage, then ask yourself today, maybe, how can I care for myself today? In the thousands of tools that exist in 2025, what could I practice or how could I lean into something that I already have, that it moves from knowledge to a little bit of wisdom in my life? If I'm already feel like I'm caring for myself well, how do I participate in a deeper understanding of self-awareness and an understanding of who I am, that I can understand my conflict responses in this world so that I don't continue showing up that way on the freeway, or even worse, for the people who I actually love most in my life? If I can deal with the conflict in my life, what are the ways that I can practice finding calm, reminding myself to breathe, reminding myself that just like the clouds in the sky move quickly, so too will emotions fade and pass. And that I can find calm even through this, and there might be a new and better reality that can come even just a little bit later in life. And if I can find some calm in my life, then maybe you're asking yourself, how do I be a person who's got some wisdom and maturity, and I can offer compassion not only to myself and others and to the systems that feel out of control in this world, but how do I be someone who's a teacher of this compassion to the people that I love the most? This is what I believe about who we are, New Abbey, the way of Jesus that we want to practice, and the ability that we have to face our fears. Would you find the same 3 or 4 people around you, and would you answer this question? What ability will you use to be courageous? Enjoy.